everyone, and welcome to another Camera Jabber video. Today I'm speaking to Donna Crous, who is a fantastic food photographer who I've been following for a while, and she's had fantastic success with the Pink Lady Food Photography Awards. Hi Donna, how are you?
Hi Angela, thank you for having me. I'm really good, and you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you very much. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you, you too.
So you've had good success with the Pink Lady Food Photography Awards. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've achieved?
Well, I started submitting to Pink Lady Food Photographer of the Year 4 years ago, and since then, I've been fortunate enough to be in the finals every year. And yeah, I mean, it's a great achievement. It's a really fantastic awards, and if anybody knows the Pink Lady Food Photographer Awards, it's almost like the Academy Awards of food photography. So it's every year it just gets bigger and better and tougher. And yeah, I mean, the standard every year just gets really hard and really good. So yeah, it's the benchmark.
I can certainly vouch for that. I help with the shortlisting. I have been doing since Camera Jabber started in 2016. And yes, it gets harder and harder to correct shortlist of each category each year because the quality just gets better and better.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I mean, there's such a huge variety of categories as well, which makes it, pretty much anything can be entered. And it's really exciting because, you don't necessarily need to be a food stylist or have a home studio to be able to enter. You can, in so many of the different categories, there's anything is sort of really an option.
Yes, because there's sort of like a documentary side, a political side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So would you like to share some images with us?
Yeah, well, I'm going to share my first one that I submitted. So 4 years ago, I decided that my original sort of entry into food photography was through blogging. And I started to follow Pink Lady, and I was receiving their subscription letters, their newsletters on a sort of a monthly basis. And towards the end of the entries deadline, it's sort of a couple of days before they start a countdown. So from 7 days, every single day you get an email to say you've got 7 days to enter or 6 days to enter. And I'd really just subscribed so that I could see just different food photography images. And I sort of got to about day 3, and I started to think, I wonder if I should submit something, but I'm not a food photographer, so why should I be submitting? Because I'm a blogger and I'm not a food photographer, and I really don't call myself a photographer at all. So it was almost imposter syndrome about deciding whether I should enter or not. And I think we got to day 2 or day 1, and finally plucked up the courage, and I entered this image and a few others, and I literally submitted it and forgot about it. And one of the great things about Pink Lady is that they don't leave you hanging for a long time when you enter a competition. Some competitions you can wait 6 months, but with Pink Lady, sort of a couple of weeks later, I got an email to say that I'd been shortlisted, that 2 of my images had been shortlisted. I really didn't even understand what that meant because I've never entered a photography competition before. So I was like, yay, that's awesome. That's great. Then I got an email to say that I was in the finals, and I'd submitted into the blogger category, and went along to the most incredible award ceremony. I was sort of totally blown away and really impressed, and found out that my image had been selected as 3rd in the category. And really from there, this was the breakout image for me, which I think made me realize that there isn't a moment in your career where you go, right, I'm a food photographer, or right, I'm a photographer. And yeah. I think for me, it was walking in, seeing this image on the wall in the gallery, and sort of going, yeah, I can actually do this. This is possible. So this is my first image. I mean, it was 4 years ago, very different to what I do now. And I mean, obviously I would make 101 changes to this now, but I mean, at the end of the day, it really this was the one that did it for me.
I assume at the time you were blogging about food.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this was a fudge recipe that I'd made, and yeah, I mean it was just I think you can submit 5 images in one submission
Mm-hmm.
for Pink Lady, and I think I chose 5, and this was one of the ones that I submitted. And one of the things I've learned with Pink Lady is over the years is that some of the images that you really love yourself as a photographer are not necessarily the ones that are going to get chosen. So you do need to, and again, the ones that do really well on Instagram are not necessarily the ones that would be chosen by Pink Lady.
Yeah.
So you do really need to enter a variety of different images, but because it's subjective at the end of the day. It's not necessarily what you like, it's what the judges look at and what the judges like as well. So it's about submitting a range of different images.
Yeah, I think sometimes as photographers, it's quite hard to dissociate the difficulty of creating an image with its success. So, you know, if you put yourself through all sorts of trauma to take a fantastic photo, well, to take a photograph, and then there's another one which literally you turn around and thought, well, that's a nice scene, and took a shot, and then you compare the images, it's possible that the quick shot is actually the better image.
Well,
But you
I mean,
invested
the
so
ones
much in the other one.
exactly, the ones that you are less emotionally involved in, I actually find are, it's almost the ones that happen more comfortably are the ones that actually do better. When especially with my images where they're staged and they're set up, you know, sometimes when I try and put too much into it, then it's just not as successful.
Yeah.
So so the next year, the bug had bitten. So the next year I submitted into a range of different categories. So I didn't just go for blogging, I went for a range of different categories. And this was the image that was selected. It was entered into the festival. I don't think they have this category anymore, but this was entered for, I think it was British festivals. Right. And again, you know, it's what it did for me was it took me out, it made me start to see food photography in a whole new world. So it wasn't just about setting up at home, and it wasn't just creating these big sets and fancy tarts and that sort of thing. It was about going out to festivals, to events, and seeing food outside of my home and outside of my studio. Yeah, I mean, I really didn't expect this image. This again was a thrown at the last minute, and this was the one, I think it also came third that year in that category. So yeah, you know, really surprised me with that one.
Yeah.
The next year, this was the one I submitted, and this went into Cream of the Crop. This made it into the finals for Cream of the Crop. And this was, again, one of those images where I took it in 10 minutes. I had a whole load of different colored tomatoes. My daughter just arrived home from school. The picture wasn't working really well, so I said, put this jumper on and stick your hands in the image, and let's see what happens. And you know, the image just came together with that, and it went into Cream of the Crop, which for me was a big step in my photography career, because Cream of the Crop is one of the categories that I've always aspired to be in as a finalist. I think Cream of the Crop is beautiful portraiture photography of food. And yeah, I mean, that was a real privilege for me to have been in that category with some of the amazing photographers.
It is one of the hardest as well, isn't it? Because I think it's one of the biggest categories. You say it only took you 10 minutes, but it's perhaps by that time, you know, you've honed your craft a bit. But things like, you know, the choice of the jumper color and the scarf and the background and the tray all just work really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, I was really going for making the food stand out. That is a style that I like to work in, is pushing my background and everything away. So it's giving a storyline, but it's not stealing the story, and that the food is actually the hero at the end of the day. Yeah. And I mean, the variety of those different tomatoes was I just love tomatoes. They're so photogenic, and just to be able to show the different shapes and textures and colors on those tomatoes was the objective for me. So really, it was about making sure that everything, that the story behind this picture of the hands holding the crate and the wooden background just didn't take over from the actual tomatoes. But it provides a storyline. So there is still a story. It's not just tomatoes. There is still a story to it, but it doesn't steal the show.
Also, having the hands there, it helps me put myself in that scene.
Yes.
I think if the hands weren't there, because I actually feel like I could be holding that tray or putting
Yes.
that tray down. And like you say, that the tomatoes just stand out like jewels.
Yeah. Oh, tomatoes. I love photographing tomatoes because there's just so many different varieties of colors and shapes. And yeah, I mean, they're a lot of fun to do. So that's one of the things I always suggest to people when they're wanting to learn food photography and they're wanting to start out, is just grab some raw ingredients and photograph raw ingredients. I mean, raw ingredients like this are just absolutely stunning, and you can do so much with them. You don't have to be a chef, you don't have to be a cook, you don't have to be a whiz in the kitchen to be able to do this sort of thing. And I mean, if you can really base a career just on raw ingredients and fresh, wholesome ingredients.
And was this shot using natural light, or have you illuminated it in any way?
This was using natural light. So I had natural light coming in from one direction. You can see actually the light is, the highlights are all on the left-hand side of these tomatoes.
Yeah.
And then I had my daughter as a contortionist underneath the tripod. So I had the tripod in an overhead position. And then she was sort of splayed out between the legs of the tripod, lying as flat as possible to match the angle of the
Right.
of the crate. Because if she'd been sitting up, the hands would have been at a different angle, so it would have been from an overhead shot, from an overhead perspective, it would have looked really odd. So she had to try and have her arms as level as possible with the crate that she was holding. Yeah, so that would have made an interesting behind the scenes shot. But
no, but it is important to think about things like that, isn't it? If her hands have been up, but it looks like she's holding it out.
Yes, it would have looked like it would have had a different perspective for the viewer. So yeah. So
is the tray on a table or on the floor?
It's actually on wooden planks that are on the floor.
Right.
And then
yeah.
So
the way you've shot it, it does look like she's sort of lifted them onto a table, and hence she had to lie down to emulate that.
Yeah. So the planks, I get 4 wooden planks, and I lie them together on the floor, put my tripod in the overhead position, and then put the tray on top.
Right.
And it does, I think, even just the different, the tray may have been lifted slightly off the base, just to add a little bit of depth of field to the whole image. But it wouldn't have been substantial. It would have just been a plate or a bowl that may have raised it.
Yeah. That makes sense, actually, putting them on the ground, because obviously if it's on a table and you're doing an overhead shot, suddenly your tripod's got to go even higher.
Yes.
So if you put it all down,
definitely, it's so much easier to have everything set up on the floor, unless you've got a really high tripod. It's way easier just to have it all set out on the floor and stand over. I mean, even for me, I'm 5'3", so I still have to get a step ladder at my maximum height on my on my tripod. I still have to get a step ladder to see what's going on properly.
Step stool.
Yeah. And then I'll go into the final image. This was the one from this year. And again, totally different to what I do. So many of my friends and colleagues who spotted this in Pink Lady, so many people didn't even know that this was my image, because it's just so different from what I normally do. Taken on holiday in Zanzibar and submitted into, I think it was food for sale category in Pink Lady. And it's really about always looking, always on the hunt for a new food shot. Whether it's so everything for me is, I've kind of memorized the different categories of Pink Lady. So whenever I go out and I have my camera with me, it's like, right, that I can submit for. I can take a picture of that and submit it into this category or that category. So, my whole year I spend planning which categories I'm going to submit into Pink Lady.
So you've already started shooting for 2021?
I haven't. Well, I've been doing a lot of lockdown photography, so I'll probably, I wonder if they're going to do a lockdown category this year. That would be interesting. Like things that were shot during lockdown. So I've been working on a lot of lockdown stuff, so I'll probably enter that as my sort of personal portfolio.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting shot. I remember this one, actually, and I remembered your tomato one, but interesting, there's no it's obviously about selling and food being sold by a person, but there's no people in this shot.
There was actually somebody in the original picture. There is actually somebody to the right, but there was so much going on behind him. There were cars and there were rubbish bins and all sorts of things that it actually just really kind of just took away from the image. So, but what I wanted to show about this image was that I called it the one-stop shop, because I mean, literally, you can get foreign currency and razor blades and kitchen knives all in this tiny little shop on the beach in Zanzibar.
Yes.
And I just loved that you could just literally do all your shopping in one little spot.
Yeah.
So, and you can buy a sarong or a wrap for the beach. I mean, it was just had everything. So, but yeah, I mean, I think to the right-hand side of it was very messy and very sort of cluttered, and so I had to try and crop that out. So unfortunately, I lost the vendor who was standing, having some time out on the right-hand side, which would have been good to have, but I just felt that it just took away too much from the food side of the shop, and sort of, you know, took the interest away from what was actually happening in the shop.
You weren't tempted to have a word and ask if they'd pop into the shop or anything like that to actually pose?
No, the locals were not happy with photographers. This, I had to, every time he looked at me, I had to hide my camera. So I had to try and snap it and then hide my camera, because the locals were not happy with photographers on the beach. So they were, they weren't comfortable with us photographing, or anybody, even with the phone. They would get quite upset. So, so yeah, it had to be done in stealth mode when he wasn't looking.
So I assume you're looking forward to the next competition.
I am. I mean, every year I approach it with hesitation, because every year it just gets really, really tougher. And I think every year I say to myself, I will submit. And if I'm fortunate enough to make it into the semifinals or into the finals, that's a win for me. That's a great win. And if I'm not, you know, just keep trying, because I think sometimes you're just submitting what the judges might not want to be seeing or are looking for that particular year. So I don't think it's a personal, you know, I don't think it's a personal attack on your photography as such. It just might not be what they were looking for that particular year. And I think, you know, you can actually resubmit the same images in the following year. So there's no rules about if you've got an image that you really, really like, that you think could make it, you know, you could submit it the following year and probably find that it could make it through, because it's just something that maybe the previous year somebody else had submitted a similar image that was better. You know, you just don't know what the judges are looking for in each year. So I think it's just about, I always say, you can't catch a fish if your line's not in the water. So you have to put your images into the pot if you do want to get somewhere. I mean, that's one thing I learned right from the very beginning was the judges are not going to come to me and say, hey, Donna, have you submitted? So
we're waiting for you.
Yeah, we're waiting for you. Come, what's happening? Why haven't you submitted yet? So you have to do it. You have to just bite the bullet and just do it. And, you know, so, you know, nobody has to know. You could submit, nobody has to know. And if if nothing happens, well, nothing happens. But there's just nothing to lose by entering.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You've really got to get your images in there, give it a go. Because like you say, it's all anonymous. So nobody knows. And I know for absolute certainty that the Pink Lady Food Photography Awards, they look at every image and scrutinize it. And, you know, there's a decision made, and it's not a snap decision on anybody's image. But as you say, you know, it's looking at the thing as a whole. And sometimes, say, if you've submitted a beautiful portrait of a pineapple and somebody else has submitted a beautiful portrait of a pineapple, ultimately, only one of those shots is going to be picked.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so it can be very, very close.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, for me, it was a defining moment in my career when I was placed third in my first image. And you know, my career has been based off that competition. And you know, and I think people often ask how my career started, and I have to give all the credit to the competition, because through the competition I was introduced to the photography show, through the photography show, I was introduced to Nikon. So, just being just being out there, getting yourself out there is really important. It's really tough if you're an individual photographer, but if you get the backing of a big sort of competition like Pink Lady, they can really help get you out there. Particularly, I think, because I'm a local UK photographer, so that was the advantage. Because I was, I think in my category, in my first year, the other two, the winner and the second place, were from another country. So because I was third and I was UK based, that was obviously the name that was put forward to speak at the photography show. And yeah, definitely an advantage for to be locally based and to be able to step up and take on these roles.
Yeah, and organizations like the photography show and companies like Nikon, they're always on the lookout for new talent. But it's very hard for them to spot it within the huge pool, which is Instagram and all the other social media things.
Absolutely.
So, by winning an award or, being placed third, it really highlights you.
But also, I mean, the whole competition has brought food photography forward. Because I think people think when I say I'm a food photographer, people think I photograph my plate of food. That's what they think a food photographer is. And I think the world of photography is really opening up to food photography now. And, there's just become so much interest in food photography. And it's definitely because of competitions like this that have shown the photography world that food photography isn't just a photograph of your plate of food, or sort of the commercialized side, which has got a bit of a bad reputation for fake food and that sort of thing. So I think being able to show different kinds of food images in different kinds of scenarios has been really good for the food photography industry in general.
Yeah, and I mean, who doesn't like looking at a nice layout of food or an interesting story surrounding food?
Well, we have such a connection to food as human beings that, I think people are instinctively drawn to looking at food. Even in sort of a magazine or a travel magazine, I would always naturally go to the food section and look at the food recipes, and sort of Waitrose magazine, always looking at the images and the recipes that are being shown, because it's a primal instinct of ours to look at food. So to be able to see good quality images is really great.
So your career, you were working in another industry, and then you were blogging about food, and you just popped an image into the Pink Lady Food Photography Awards.
Yeah.
Got placed third. How did it? I know sort of what the end result is, but how did it snowball from there? You said that the photography show got in touch. What did you do then?
So the photography show got in touch, and they said, first time we tried food photography at the photography show, we're looking for a speaker. Actually, they were interested in blogging, in food photography and blogging. And I'd never done any public speaking. I hadn't even spoken at my husband's 40th birthday celebration. I was so scared of public speaking. So I got this phone call, and I thought, I mean, what am I going to do? So I like to rise to the challenge, and I thought about it, and I thought, yes, I will definitely do this. I'll put my fears aside and I'll face this. And I asked a very good friend of mine, who's also a photographer, B. Lubas, to join me on stage. And the two of us, I like the idea of the two of us, because we've got such opposite styles. We could give two sets of information. So the two of us set to work, and we worked on a presentation, and we did our. Actually, that first year was the year that it was snowed out. It was the snow year, so I wasn't able to make it because I was supposed to drive up. I had a 3-hour drive up, so I wasn't able to make it because we were snowed in. So B actually, thankfully, was able to do the presentation on that day. So I actually didn't even make it on stage for the first talk. And then the second year, just before the photography show, Nikon then got in touch with me through the photography show. So they were obviously also looking for a new style of photography as well, to be able to present. And so many doors opened up in the process to get to where I am today, to be able to speak and to be able to do interviews, because it just based on the recommendation. Because when you submit to Pink Lady, you have to give your camera details as well, so you have to give your behind the scenes details as well. So obviously they were aware of the fact that I was using a Nikon camera, and so all of that sort of just falls into place afterwards.
And I know you've done some Instagram lives, haven't you, with Nikon, talking about food photography?
Yes, yes, yeah. And I
How
do
did you find
workshops
those?
at Nikon School of Photography.
Right.
So it started with talking at the show, and then I started to do some Nikon in London have their store, and they run coffee cakes and cameras where you can
Mhm.
go along as a photographer and just listen to other photographers speak. So I did a copy cakes and cameras, and then started running workshops. So I've run a number of workshops at Nikon School, and yeah, so that's where my relationship just has developed with Nikon. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest on the food photography side, particularly people who are sort of looking for a career change into blogging and getting onto a platform. It's there's a lot of interest in doing it from home and being able to either be a full-time mum and do
Mhm.
this as a side business, or a lot of people sort of older who are looking to develop and grow into something new.
Am I right in thinking you've got a book coming out soon?
I do. I'm still working on the book,
Hmm.
and so it'll only be out next year. But
Right.
it's a recipe book. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So you've gone from working in a different career, um, sort of in the space of 4 years. You're now working full time as a food photographer.
Yeah, yeah, I'm full time. So I was originally in banking. I was
Hmm.
a financial advisor. I then stopped working for 20 years when I had my children,
Hmm.
and reached a stage where that's when I got into blogging. And then through the blogging, my photography career started to take off. And now, yeah, it's a full-time job. I do food photography for, I mainly do a lot of recipe books.
Yeah.
So I shoot for other authors. So authors write the books. My publishers are based in Boston in the USA,
Hmm.
and then I will receive a manuscript from the publishers, and I will then shop, which is really a big part of the whole
Yeah.
process. So shop, cook, style, photograph, edit, and send back a full, complete visual part of the book for the authors.
That sounds really interesting. So I imagine the lockdown had a bit of an impact on you doing the shopping, because obviously
Yeah,
you've got to be very particular about which ingredients you pick.
yeah,
You don't want to be
yeah.
hanging around
I
too much.
Yeah, I did actually. I did do a book during lockdown. I shot a book
Mhm.
for the publishers, and that I was really hesitant about taking on the deal because I didn't know whether I would be able to source the ingredients.
Mm.
Sometimes I do have ingredient issues between the two different countries, so I really had to go through the book with a fine tooth comb to see if I would be able to get the ingredients easily. I mean, and it was very easy to get. It was just everyday ingredients. Um, and yeah, I mean, initially I really had to get my ducks in a row. I had to work out exactly which recipes I was shooting on what day,
Hmm.
and how long the produce would last, how long I would be able to keep the produce before it started to look a little bit old and tired.
Yeah.
And I was queuing for sort of this was really at the start of lockdown. So I was queuing for an hour at a time to get into the shops to
Mm.
be able to do my shopping. I couldn't book online sessions because online delivery sessions because everything was fully booked.
Yeah.
So I really had to go and stand in queue for an hour at a time. I then discovered my local farm store was much easier to get into. So I started to, and because it was a book based on a lot of fresh ingredients, I was able just to pop down every morning, grab my fresh ingredients, and then come back and start shooting. But normally, what I would do is I would have a delivery that comes in at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would have a food delivery that arrives, and then I would start cooking and prepping from there. But obviously during lockdown, I had to extend I wasn't able to cook as many recipes in a day, and I really had to just extend how long it was going my deadline as to how long it was going to take.
Yeah. So when you're photographing somebody else's recipes, do you always do all the cooking?
Yes. Yeah, my oldest daughter, who's 22, when she's around, when she's not at uni, she does help me with the cooking. Yeah, but generally I always do the cooking.
Fantastic. I bet you have a well-fed family.
I do. They always say it's like a banquet. They always say it's like a buffet, in the evenings, because we can end up with 5 recipes that have been cooked in a day, and they're going to choice the different foods.
Yeah, but I guess sometimes that they find that they've got curry for breakfast and you know,
Yeah,
strange
yeah,
timings. Yeah.
yeah. They start to smell garlic being cooked up from sort of 7 o'clock in the morning when they're waking up.
Not with the cornflakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Donna, thank you for sharing that with us. It's a really interesting story. It's great to hear how, you know, just entering a competition has completely inspired your career, really.
Absolutely. And it was just a little click at sort of 2 days before the competition that said, just do it, just do it. And decision I do not regret at all ever doing.
Oh, fantastic. Well done.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye, Angela.